They did not call him unqualified. They called him disposable in a nicer accent. Guy walks into a government agency interview with solid tech skills and a normal-looking scarred-up work history. 2 4-year runs. 2 layoffs mixed in. Nothing exotic. Nothing shameful. Just the usual modern labor market nonsense where companies blow people up and then ask why their resumes look smoky. He sits down, answers the questions, and then the hiring manager decides to stop pretending this is an interview and turn it into a courtroom. She says she has a hard time believing in him because he job hopped 4 times in 10 years. He tries to explain. Says 2 of those short stops were layoffs. Public layoffs, the kind that make news. The kind no employee controls unless you think junior staff personally tank the stock price for sport. She cuts him off and says layoffs are usually the employee's fault. Says if 90% of employees stay, why was he in the bottom 10? That is not skepticism. That is contempt with a government pension. He tries again. Says he was a high performer. Says promotion was coming. Says there is context. She shuts it down. Thanks for your time. HR will see you out. End scene. HR person looks embarrassed. He thanks her and leaves. Because what else are you going to do when you need the job, need the visa, need the clock to stop ticking, and the person across from you has already decided you're a damaged inventory? That is the first thing these places do. They treat labor like used equipment. If a company laid you off, then obviously you were the faulty part. Not the budget, not the org chart, not the merger, not the idiot VP who read one blog post about efficiency and decided to turn half the staff into a line item. No, it must be you. Because gatekeepers love clean stories. And blaming a person is always cleaner than admitting the machine is stupid. And notice how fast dignity disappears once desperation enters the room. The candidate wants to fight back. Wants to say he used to make more than she probably does. Wants to explain he is only there because his visa status has him by the throat. Wants to remind her that being unemployed is not a character flaw and being laid off is not proof of low value. But he swallows it. Because panic is expensive. And gatekeepers know that. They can smell it like ozone. That is what makes this stuff so rotten. They do not just reject you, they downgrade you first. They make sure the no lands after a small ritual of disrespect. So you leave without the job, and with a little extra damage for the bus ride home. Now let me give you the office version of the same disease. Different building. Same smell. A senior sysadmin gets brought into an org on a contract to hire setup. 3 months. Real work. Real stakes. This is not some fake busy work role where you reset passwords and babysit printers. This person is knocking out high-level projects solo. MFA, SSPR, MA, Exchange Cloud Migration, Data Loss Prevention, Security Analyst work, breach investigations, HIPAA problems, reports, fixes, weekend overtime when the boss needs help fast, the kind of work that saves the company money, fines, embarrassment, maybe even lawsuits. And the feedback to his face is glowing. Boss praises him. CFO notices him. CEO notices him. Staffing agency hears good things. He helps people, delivers fast, cleans up ugly problems, likes the job, thinks this might actually convert. Then he replays a meeting recording for some info he needs. And after everyone else leaves, the boss and a couple higher-ups stay behind. And because the universe occasionally has a dark sense of humor, the recording keeps running. So he gets to hear the truth the way workers always hear it now, by accident. Through a system meant for productivity, boss says he is not what he expected. Says he is doing the work, learning, getting better, but not strategic enough. Says he is too textbook. Says he looks things up too much. Says another guy knew the domain through and through. Says he lacks the real-world experience they thought he had. Imagine hearing that after the weekend work, after the compliance saves, after the breach cleanup, after the public praise, after the boss smiled at your face and sold your value upward when it was useful. That is not feedback. That is finding out you were a rental appliance the whole time. And that is the second move these places make. They praise you in public while pricing your replacement in private. They want the labor, not the person. They want the save, not the future. They want the migration done, the compliance issue handled, the weekends covered, and then they want the right to look surprised that you assumed that meant anything. Same logic as the interview. You are not being assessed as a human being. You are being tested as a unit. Can this one run? Can this one patch? Can this one absorb stress? Can this one be swapped without too much paperwork? Once you see that, a lot of office language suddenly sounds different. Culture fit, strategic level, real-world experience, growth opportunity. These are often just stickers slapped over the same sentence. We used what you were good for, now we are looking around. And both stories run on the same filthy assumption. You need them more than they need to behave. The interviewer can be rude because you need the offer. The boss can be fake because you need the conversion. The institution always believes leverage is character. If you are trapped, they call that fit. That is the habit. They talk about loyalty, talent, and culture like those things are sacred. Then, the second somebody becomes inconvenient, expensive, or just not magical enough for the fantasy in a manager's head, that person turns into a replaceable part. Same company that would cry about retention in a town hall will quietly decide you were too textbook while using the project you finished in the next quarterly deck. If your HR department sounds like this, subscribe. 2 new meltdowns a week. Now, back to the mess. Here's the weird part. There is a control sample, an actual company decision that does not sound like abuse in a blazer. And because it is so rare, it almost feels fake. A company looks at its laptop fleet after the COVID scramble years. The old emergency buy machines are aging. ZenBooks. Users liked them. They ran fine. But the memory ceiling starts hurting because the ERP is a Java monster and browsers now eat RAM like livestock. Then the normal little deaths start piling up. Chocolate milk on keyboards, cracked screens, small broken parts. The usual. And the real problem is not the accidents. The real problem is that repair parts are scarce. Some components are basically irreplaceable, and the whole setup pushes you toward full replacement for little failures. Now stop there, because that right there is how most companies think about people too. Small failure? Replace. Changing needs? Replace. Broken part in an otherwise useful thing? Replace. No spare parts, no patience, no design for repair, no respect for what still works. Just swap the whole unit and call it efficient. But this company does something different. It moves to framework laptops. 73 devices. DIY assembly. Staff supported. Repairable. Modular. Real internal support. Real thought about docks, displays, memory, parts, and what happens when something small breaks. They choose a machine designed to be opened, fixed, upgraded, and kept alive. Think about how insane it is that this sounds radical. A company looked at recurring friction and said maybe the answer is not total replacement. Maybe the answer is supportability. Maybe the answer is parts on hand. Maybe the answer is buying something built to survive real life instead of something pretty enough to expire. That one hardware choice says more about values than most mission statements ever will. Because if you choose repairable systems, you are admitting a very basic truth. Things take damage, needs change, parts fail. A useful asset is not worthless because one piece went bad. You do not throw the whole thing away just because one corner cracked and the vendor wants to make repair annoying. That is the exact opposite of how the first 2 places treated people. In the interview story, layoffs turned a candidate into a suspect. In the Sysadmin story, one manager's private vibe check turned delivered results into a temporary convenience. In the laptop story, the company looks at wear, growth, repair cost, parts availability, and says let's build around maintenance instead of disposal. That contrast is brutal. Some places show more patience, respect, and long-term thinking toward laptops than toward staff. And before somebody says, well, hardware is different, no, not really. The mindset is the point. Do you design for repair or for replacement? Do you stock parts or excuses? Do you value continuity or do you wait until something breaks and then blame the object for failing inside the conditions you created? The framework story is not inspiring because modular laptops are sexy. It is inspiring because it is one of the only stories here where somebody looked at a recurring problem and did not respond with contempt. They responded with design. They admitted support matters. They admitted repair matters. They admitted long-term ownership matters. Imagine that mindset pointed at workers. Imagine an interviewer hearing, I got laid off twice, and thinking, okay, tell me what happened. What did you learn? What do you need? What was the environment? Instead of, sounds defective. Imagine a boss hearing, I look things up, and thinking, good, this person is careful, current, and not bluffing. Instead of, maybe we guessed too high. Imagine a company seeing a person under strain and asking what part needs support instead of whether the whole unit should be swapped. But most places do not do that, because repair takes honesty, replacement takes a spreadsheet, and cheapness loves to dress up a strategy. That is the final insult. They call this discipline, efficiency, high standards, being selective. What it usually means is they are too lazy, too vain, or too political to maintain anything that requires patience. That is why the first candidate got treated like a faulty machine. That is why the Sysadmin got praised like a hero and judged like a mismatch. And that is why the laptop story feels almost weirdly humane by comparison. Somebody actually planned for the fact that useful things deserve support. Most workplaces demand loyalty from humans they would never invest in as carefully as they invest in durable equipment. They want people to survive impact, absorb stress, self-diagnose self-repair, and smile through replacement talk. Then they call it professionalism when the disposal happens quietly. That is not culture. That is asset churn with better lighting.